Dinner had just ended, and the children were still laughing around the table. Relatives stood up, hugging and gathering coats. My husband was away on a work trip, so I was hosting alone. My mother-in-law waited until the room thinned, then stepped close to me near the sink. Without warning, she slapped me across the face. The sound cracked the air. A spoon fell. The children froze. Everyone stared and waited for me to shout or cry. I didn't. I bent down, picked up the spoon, and asked the kids to wash their hands. My cheek burned, but my voice stayed calm. My mother-in-law smiled, slow and sure, as if she had won something. A few relatives murmured excuses and hurried out. No one said my name. The door closed, and the house felt smaller. I went in my room and sat on the bed. I didn't call my husband. I didn't text anyone. I listened to the quiet and felt the shape of it. Silence can be loud if you let it be. In that moment, I understood this was not just anger. It was control. The slap was a test. If I broke, she would rule openly. If I stayed quiet, she would think I was weak. I chose quiet. She thought that meant weakness. It meant time. After that night, no one talked about the slap. Family messages stayed cheerful. Photos from dinner were shared without comment. My mother-in-law moved through the house like nothing had happened. She cooked, prayed, and smiled at the children. Everyone treated her as the center of the family, the one who held things together. When I first married into the family, I believed that story too. She helped neighbors, gave advice, and fixed problems with food and calm words. People praised her strength and patience. Living in her house felt safe at first. Then I noticed small things. Voices dropped when she entered a room. Arguments ended when she spoke. Some cupboards stayed locked, even when we needed space. The children learned rules that were never explained. I tried to ask gentle questions. I asked why certain rooms were closed. I asked why people looked afraid after she prayed with them. I was told to be respectful and not cause trouble. My husband, calling from his trips, asked me to keep peace until he returned. So I did. I stopped asking out loud. I started watching. Silence gave me space to see what others ignored. Admiration can be loud. It can drown out warning signs. I began to understand that staying quiet was not giving up. It was learning. By the third day, I noticed the children copying me. They spoke softly around their grandmother and watched her face before moving. Fear had rules now. That told me this was older than me. I remembered past visits when cousins left early or sat stiff at the table. I had missed it before. That afternoon, my mother-in-law pulled me aside and warned me not to embarrass the family. Her voice was calm, almost kind. She said a good wife keeps quiet and cooks well. I nodded and said nothing. She relaxed at once. Silence worked on her like a promise. Later, I heard her telling an aunt that I was finally learning my place. The next morning, I woke before dawn and cooked her favorite meal. I served it hot and smiled. She ate slowly, pleased. For a moment, the house felt peaceful. That peace was false, but useful. While she rested, I noticed a locked cupboard I had never seen open. The key hung on a nail behind a frame. I did not touch it. I only noted it. Silence had changed from shelter into a tool. I did not need to fight. I needed to wait. The house held secrets, and secrets always leave marks for those who stay still long enough. Life settled into a careful rhythm. My mother-in-law acted gentle, almost proud of me. She told others I was learning to be calm. I cooked, cleaned, and spoke only when needed. Inside, I stayed alert. I watched how she moved through the house and how others changed around her. When she entered a room, people straightened. When she spoke, no one argued. Even laughter stopped when she frowned. One evening, a cousin visited with her children. They were loud at first, running through the hallway. After one sharp look from my mother-in-law, they went quiet and sat close to their mother. No one explained why. Later, I heard my mother-in-law whisper a prayer over the food. The room grew tense, then calm. Too calm. The cousin left early, pale and shaking. That night, I noticed something else. The locked cupboard I had seen before was always checked before bed. My mother-in-law touched the door as if counting. I stayed silent and pretended not to see. Silence kept me safe. It also kept her careless. Before sleeping, I thought about the slap again. It was not anger. It was a warning. She wanted obedience, not love. I understood then that power in this house did not come from shouting. It came from fear and quiet control. And the quiet was something I could use too. The next day brought visitors. Neighbors came for advice, carrying small worries and tired faces. My mother-in-law listened, nodded, and spoke in low, steady tones. They left lighter, smiling, thankful. Everyone praised her wisdom. I stood nearby, pouring tea, watching closely. After one visit, I noticed the woman stumble as she walked out. She looked dizzy, confused. My mother-in-law said she was tired and laughed it off. That night, I heard the woman had fallen ill. No one connected the two events. I did. I remembered other stories. A man who argued with her and lost his job weeks later. A cousin who stopped visiting after refusing her help. At the time, they felt like bad luck. Now they felt like pieces of a pattern. I wanted to warn someone. I almost spoke to an aunt I trusted. But I remembered the laughter after the slap. I remembered how quickly silence closed around me. Speaking now would only paint me as ungrateful. So I stayed quiet. That evening, while cleaning, I brushed the frame near the locked cupboard. It shifted slightly. Behind it, I saw the key clearly. My heart beat fast, but my face stayed calm. I did not take it. Not yet. Knowing where it was felt powerful enough. False peace filled the house for days. My mother-in-law praised me more often, telling others how respectful I was. Family members relaxed, believing the trouble had passed. Even I almost believed it. That was the danger. Calm can hide sharp edges. One night, I dreamed of the house breathing, walls closing in, doors locking by themselves. I woke up shaking, but clear-headed. Dreams don't come from nowhere. They grow from things we refuse to see. The next morning, my mother-in-law gave the children strict new rules. They could not enter certain rooms. They could not speak during prayers. They could not ask questions. I watched their faces fall. Something inside me hardened. Silence was no longer just protection. It was preparation. Later that day, an old woman from the neighborhood came to the door. When she saw my mother-in-law, her face tightened. She whispered my name and asked if I was safe. Before I could answer, my mother-in-law appeared and the woman quickly left. That moment changed everything. Someone else saw it too. Someone else knew. As I watched the old woman hurry away, I felt the balance shift. I was no longer alone in my silence. And that meant the truth was closer than my mother-in-law believed. My husband called that night from his hotel. His voice was tired, cheerful in the way people sound when they don't know danger is near. He asked how the family dinner went. I told him it was fine. I did not mention the slap. I did not mention the fear in the children's eyes. He talked about work and said he trusted his mother to look after us while he was gone. When the call ended, I sat in the dark and understood something painful. Telling him now would change nothing. He wasn't here, and he still believed in the woman everyone admired. The next day, my mother-in-law announced another family visit for the weekend. She said it with a smile, like a gift. My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. More people meant more eyes. More eyes meant more chances for the truth to slip out. That afternoon, I watched her prepare food. She measured carefully, adding small things she kept hidden from view. When I stepped closer, she stopped and smiled. I stepped back. Silence kept her comfortable. Later, the children asked if their father was coming home soon. I told them yes, but not yet. I began planning quietly. If people were coming, I needed to be ready. The house felt like a stage, and something terrible was always just behind the curtain. I didn't pull it back. I waited for the moment when it would fall on its own. The morning after the call, I cooked breakfast early again. My mother-in-law watched me with approval. She liked obedience. She liked calm. She believed fear had settled where it belonged. While she ate, she spoke about respect and tradition, about how young wives must learn patience. I nodded and listened. After breakfast, she went to rest. That was when I moved carefully through the house. I did not rush. I did not search wildly. I simply noticed. The locked cupboard was dusted every day, more than anything else. The frame hiding the key had been touched often. This was important to her. In the afternoon, the old woman from the neighborhood returned, pretending to borrow salt. When my mother-in-law stepped away, the woman grabbed my hand and whispered that this house had a history. She said women before me had suffered here. Some left broken. Some disappeared from family stories. Before I could ask more, my mother-in-law returned. The woman smiled, thanked us, and left quickly. I stood there, heart pounding, but calm on the outside. That short warning meant everything. This wasn't new. This wasn't just about me. That night, I wrote down everything I had seen and heard. Silence had given me time. Now it was giving me proof. The weekend visit began with laughter and noise. Children ran through the house, adults talked loudly, and food covered every table. My mother-in-law moved like a queen, smiling and directing everyone. People praised her cooking, her kindness, her strength. I served quietly and watched. During dinner, she told stories about family honor and respect. She looked at me often, waiting for signs of weakness. I gave her none. The children stayed close to me, quieter than before. One aunt noticed and frowned. After the meal, my mother-in-law led a long prayer. The room grew heavy. I felt the same strange calm I had felt before, like the air pressing down. When it ended, one cousin looked pale and dizzy. People joked about eating too much. I saw fear in his eyes. For a moment, I thought maybe this gathering would pass without trouble. That was the false hope. Later that night, I heard a loud argument in the hallway. My mother-in-law was angry, her voice sharp. Then silence fell again. I stood in my room, listening, and knew things were moving faster now. The family was together. The house was full. And cracks were starting to show. Silence had carried me this far. Soon, it would have to carry the truth into the open. The next morning, the cousin who looked pale did not come down for breakfast. His wife said he felt weak and dizzy. My mother-in-law shook her head and said it was nothing serious. She offered to pray for him. The room went quiet. No one refused her. After she prayed, she smiled and said he would be fine by evening. Everyone seemed relieved. I was not. Later, while cleaning, I noticed something new. A small mark had appeared on the cupboard door, scratched lightly, like someone had tried to open it and failed. My chest tightened. That cupboard was not just important. It was guarded. That afternoon, the old woman from the neighborhood returned again. This time, she did not come inside. She stood at the gate and asked me softly if my husband was home. I said no. She sighed and told me I needed to be careful. She said the women who stayed quiet survived longer, but only if they knew when to speak. Before I could ask more, my mother-in-law called my name sharply from inside the house. The old woman left at once. That night, the cousin's condition worsened. An ambulance was called, but my mother-in-law refused to go with them. She said hospitals made things worse. Everyone listened. I sat with the children and felt something hard settle in my chest. Silence had protected me. But now, silence was no longer enough. The house felt different after the ambulance left. Quieter, heavier. People whispered instead of laughing. My mother-in-law stayed calm, almost pleased, telling everyone to trust her. She cooked soup and said it would help everyone feel better. No one refused it. I pretended to sip mine and poured the rest away later. That afternoon, I finally touched the frame behind the cupboard. The key slid into my hand easily, like it had been waiting. I did not open the door right away. I waited until the house slept. When I turned the key, the cupboard opened with a soft click. Inside were old items wrapped in cloth, small bowls, faded papers, and strange objects marked with symbols I didn't understand. The air smelled old and sharp. I took photos with my phone and closed the door carefully. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. This was not superstition. This was something planned and practiced. The next morning, my mother-in-law watched me closely, her eyes sharp. She asked if I had slept well. I smiled and said yes. She nodded, but her smile did not reach her eyes. She knew something had changed. Silence was no longer invisible to her. It had shape now. And she was starting to feel it. False peace returned again, stronger than before. My mother-in-law became extra kind, praising me in front of everyone. She hugged the children and spoke gently. Family members relaxed, believing the danger had passed. Even I almost doubted myself. That was the trap. The cousin was released from the hospital, but did not return to the house. His wife said he wanted to rest elsewhere. My mother-in-law looked annoyed, but said nothing. Her control had slipped slightly, and she felt it. That evening, my husband called to say he would be home in 2 days. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to tell him everything. Another part knew timing mattered. If I spoke too early, I would lose. I went to the old woman's house before sunset. She let me in and looked at the photos I had taken. Her face went pale. She told me the truth then. The house had been used for dark rituals long ago. My mother-in-law had learned them from her own mother. The power only worked when fear and silence fed it. But silence can break it too, the old woman said. If used the right way. I walked home with a plan forming slowly and carefully. The family would gather again soon. My husband would be there. The house would be full. And this time, silence would lead the truth straight into the light. The next 2 days felt slow, like the house was holding its breath. My mother-in-law watched me closely now. She no longer looked pleased. She looked careful. I stayed calm and kind, doing everything she expected. I cooked, cleaned, and spoke softly. Silence kept her guessing. The children sensed the change. They stayed near me and asked when their father would return. I told them soon. I began preparing them quietly, teaching them simple rules about staying together and speaking only when asked. They listened without questions. Fear makes children learn fast. That afternoon, my mother-in-law locked the cupboard again and moved the frame slightly. She checked the key twice. I pretended not to notice. Inside, I felt steady. I already had what I needed. Later, another aunt arrived early to help prepare for the next family gathering. She whispered that people were worried about the cousin who fell sick. Rumors were spreading. My mother-in-law smiled and blamed stress. The aunt nodded, but doubt flickered in her eyes. That doubt mattered. Doubt weakens control. That night, I packed a small bag and hid it near the door. Not to run, but to be ready. Silence is strongest when paired with choice. I wasn't trapped anymore. I was waiting. My husband came home the next evening. The children ran to him, clinging tightly. My mother-in-law greeted him warmly, acting proud and loving. I watched him relax, comforted by the picture she painted. I said nothing. Over dinner, she told stories about how well the house had been running. She praised me again, calling me respectful and obedient. My husband smiled at me. I smiled back. Silence held. Later, alone in our room, my husband asked if everything was okay. I told him we would talk soon. I asked him to trust me for one more day. He looked confused but agreed. The next morning, preparations began for a final family gathering. My mother-in-law insisted everyone come. She wanted witnesses. She always did. I visited the old woman one last time. She gave me clear instructions. The objects in the cupboard fed on fear, secrecy, and obedience. If brought into the open with truth and witnesses, their power would break. When I returned home, my mother-in-law stood in the doorway, blocking my path. Her voice was low and sharp. She told me not to embarrass her. I looked at her calmly and said nothing. That silence made her angry. I knew then the time was close. The house filled again with voices, footsteps, and children's laughter. Family members arrived with food and worry mixed together. My husband stayed close to me, sensing tension he could not yet name. My mother-in-law moved fast, controlling the space, guiding people where she wanted them. During dinner, she began another long prayer. The room grew heavy again. I felt the pressure, but I did not bow my head. I stayed still. Halfway through the prayer, the lights flickered. Someone gasped. My mother-in-law paused, startled. That had never happened before. Her control slipped, just for a second. After dinner, she announced it was time for a blessing. She reached for the cupboard key. Her hand shook. I stood up calmly and said her name. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me. My heart beat fast, but my voice stayed steady. I said we needed to talk as a family. My mother-in-law laughed sharply and told me to sit down. I didn't. Silence had protected me long enough. Now it gave me strength. My husband stood up beside me. The moment had arrived. The room stayed silent as my husband stood beside me. My mother-in-law's smile faded. She told everyone this was not the time for drama. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse her. I simply asked her why the cupboard was always locked. People shifted in their seats. Someone laughed nervously. She said it held old family items and was none of my concern. I nodded and asked why a cousin became sick after she prayed. Her eyes flashed. She said sickness came from weak faith. A few heads nodded, but others looked unsure. I took out my phone and placed it on the table. I showed the photos I had taken from inside the cupboard. The room leaned forward. My mother-in-law stepped toward me, her voice sharp, telling me to stop. I stayed still. The old woman from the neighborhood stood up from her chair. She said she had seen these objects before. She said they were not blessings. They were tools. Fear rippled through the room. My mother-in-law shouted for everyone to be quiet. No one moved. Silence had shifted sides. My husband looked at the photos again, then at his mother. His face changed slowly, like something heavy settling in. He asked her to explain. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had no words. The truth came out slowly, like a crack spreading through glass. The old woman spoke calmly, explaining the house's past and the rituals passed down through generations. She said the power only worked when no one questioned it. When fear stayed quiet, family members whispered to each other, remembering things they had ignored for years. Sudden sickness, broken relationships, people who stopped visiting. My mother-in-law tried to regain control. She said the old woman was lying. She said I had turned everyone against her. Her voice rose, sharp and loud. It did not work anymore. I said nothing. I let others speak. That was the final break. Control needs silence from everyone else. Now it only had mine. My husband asked his mother if she had ever hurt people on purpose. She said she did what was needed to keep the family strong. That answer chilled the room. Someone suggested calling a priest. Another suggested leaving the house. The family began to move away from her, slowly, like water pulling back. My mother-in-law's face twisted with fear and anger. She pointed at me and said this was my fault. I met her eyes calmly. I had not shouted. I had not fought. I had waited. And now her power had nowhere left to hide. The house felt different once the family stepped outside. Air moved again. Children breathed easier. My mother-in-law stood alone in the living room, smaller than she had ever seemed. The cupboard stood open behind her. The old woman told everyone the objects had to be removed and destroyed. Fear could not feed them anymore. My husband helped carry them out, his hands shaking but steady. My mother-in-law screamed and begged, then grew quiet. Without her audience, her anger collapsed into weakness. She sank into a chair and covered her face. That night, the family did not stay. Everyone left together. We stayed at a hotel. The children slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. The next morning, my husband apologized. Not loudly. Not with excuses. He said he should have listened sooner. I nodded. That was enough. When we returned to the house later, the cupboard was empty. The rooms felt lighter. The old woman said the power was gone because silence no longer fed it. My mother-in-law moved out soon after. She stopped calling. Her control ended not with punishment, but with truth. I never raised my hand. I never raised my voice. Silence carried me through fear. And in the end, silence won. Weeks passed, and life slowly found a new rhythm. We did not return to living with my mother-in-law. My husband rented a small place closer to his work. The children laughed more and slept better. Their fear faded little by little. That alone told me we had done the right thing. Family members began calling, not to argue, but to talk. Some apologized for staying quiet. Others shared stories they had never dared to tell. Each story sounded different, but the feeling was the same. Fear had lived in silence for years. My mother-in-law stayed away. When her name came up, people spoke carefully, like they were learning a new habit. She no longer held power over the family. Without the house, without secrecy, she was just a woman with a past no one wanted to protect anymore. One afternoon, the old woman visited me. She said breaking the pattern mattered more than punishing the person. Silence had been used to harm, but it could also be used to heal. That night, I watched my children play on the floor, safe and loud. I understood then that winning did not mean revenge. It meant ending the cycle. But part of me knew the story was not fully finished yet. When control lasts for years, it does not disappear quietly. It looks for cracks. And I knew my mother-in-law would try one last time. The call came late at night. My mother-in-law's voice sounded weak and frightened. She said she was sick and alone. She asked us to come back and help her. My husband looked at me unsure. Old habits die slowly. I told him we would check on her in the morning with others present. Not alone. Not in silence. He agreed. The next day, we went with 2 relatives and the old woman. The house felt empty and cold. My mother-in-law lay on the couch, watching us closely. Her weakness felt real, but also familiar. She asked to speak to me privately. I refused. Calmly. In front of everyone. Her eyes filled with anger, then fear. She tried to blame me again, saying I had ruined the family. No one responded. Silence answered her, but it was no longer lonely silence. It was shared. The old woman said the house would be sold. The family agreed. My mother-in-law cried, but no one gave in. That was the moment her control truly ended. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She simply realized there was no one left to listen. After the house was sold, the family gathered one last time, not in fear, but in peace. No prayers were whispered. No rules hung in the air. People spoke freely, laughed freely, and left when they wished. My husband thanked me quietly for staying strong when he could not. I told him strength wasn't loud. It was patient. My mother-in-law moved far away. We heard little about her after that. When we did, it was clear she no longer held influence over anyone. Power fades fast when silence stops feeding it. I thought often about the slap. Not with anger, but clarity. It had been meant to break me. Instead, it taught me when to stay quiet and when to stand. Silence had protected me at first. Then it became my shield. Finally, it became my voice. The lesson stayed with me. Not every fight needs shouting. Not every victory needs applause. Sometimes, the strongest response is calm patience. And sometimes, the quiet ones are the ones who change everything. The weeks after the house was sold felt strange but calm. The family did not rush to replace old habits. We took things slow. People spoke carefully at first, as if waiting for permission. Then, little by little, voices grew stronger. Laughter returned without fear following it. The children played without watching the door. One afternoon, a cousin invited everyone to her home. She said she wanted a fresh start. There were no rules about silence or prayer. Food was simple. No one was in charge. The difference was clear right away. People stayed longer. They spoke honestly. Some even cried. During the visit, someone asked about my mother-in-law. The room went quiet, but not tense. Just thoughtful. An aunt said power only lasts when people protect it. No one disagreed. Later, my husband told me he finally understood how deep the control had gone. He said he felt ashamed for not seeing it sooner. I told him seeing it now mattered more. The past could not be changed, but the future could. That night, I sat alone and thought about silence again. Silence had once kept me safe. Now it gave me peace. The house no longer felt heavy anywhere we went. Still, I knew one last thing remained. The truth needed to settle fully. And that meant facing the memory, not the person. I returned to the old house one final time, not to confront anyone, but to let go. It was empty now. No furniture. No locked doors. Light filled the rooms in a way it never had before. I walked slowly, listening to my own footsteps. In the kitchen, I stood where the slap had happened. I remembered the sound. The shock. The children's silence. I did not feel fear anymore. I felt clear. I spoke out loud, softly, telling the truth of what happened. Not to blame. Not to accuse. Just to release it. Words filled the space where silence had once been forced. Outside, the old woman waited for me. She nodded when I came out. She said the house no longer held power because it was seen for what it was. Darkness fades when it is named. Later that day, I told my children the full story in simple words. I told them silence can be strong, but only when you choose it. I told them no one has the right to hurt them and call it love. They listened closely. Then they hugged me. That was the biggest reveal of all. The cycle did not break when fear ended. It broke when truth was spoken without anger. Life moved forward in quiet, steady ways. We built new routines that did not depend on fear or control. The children grew louder, happier, more sure of themselves. My husband listened more and spoke with care. Our home felt balanced. The family changed too. Gatherings became smaller but warmer. People checked on each other instead of waiting for permission. When someone disagreed, they spoke openly. Silence was no longer a weapon. It was a choice. Sometimes I thought about my mother-in-law. Not with hate, but with understanding. Her power had come from being believed without question. Once that belief was gone, nothing held it up. I was asked more than once how I stayed calm through everything. I always gave the same answer. I stayed quiet until quiet stopped protecting me. Then I spoke. Looking back, I saw how the story fit together. The slap, the cooking, the watching, the waiting. Every part mattered. Silence was not weakness. It was patience with purpose. The family did not cheer when control ended. They breathed easier. That was enough. Some victories are loud. This one was not. It was steady. It was lasting. And it belonged to everyone who chose truth over fear. I think about that night often, not because it hurt, but because it taught me who I was. When my mother-in-law slapped me, everyone expected noise. They expected tears, shouting, or anger. I gave them none of that. I gave them silence, and silence gave me time. Time to see the pattern. Time to protect my children. Time to wait until truth could stand on its own. Silence was never about fear. It was about control and choosing when to release it. When I finally spoke, I did not raise my voice. I did not insult or accuse. I simply told the truth, and the truth did the work for me. The family learned something too. They learned that respect does not come from fear. It comes from honesty. They learned that power fades when it is questioned, and that silence only helps harm when it is forced. My life is quieter now, but not in the old way. This quiet feels safe. It feels chosen. The children laugh freely. My home feels light. No one walks on eggshells anymore. The lesson stays with me every day. You do not always win by fighting back. Sometimes you win by staying still, watching closely, and waiting for the right moment. Silence can be a shield. Silence can be a plan. And when used wisely, silence can change everything.